You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody.
Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Join Steve and his guests every week as he staggers from Georgia to Maine.
Hey guys, good to have you back with me again on the podcast. You are listening to Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. And I'm your host, Steve Adams on Mighty Blue. After last week's adventure on the Carolinian with Jason Tompkins, we're back on familiar ground with Billy Arthur, who completed the AT this year and found way more than he'd been looking for. You'll understand when you hear Billy's story. And part of it is how people meet on the trail, hike together for months and then have to re-engage with real life. In Billy's case, he's a really aware bloke and has handled that transition from life on the trail back down to earth and explains how it has affected him. Billy will be on shortly. Then Joanne Flagg is our next member of the Mighty Blue class of 23. Joanne is an experienced hiker, but not an experienced backpacker. She's heading for Harpers Ferry in April and will be doing a flip-flop. Today, after we've heard from Billy, she tells us why she chose to do it that way. Finally, George is finally out of Virginia. When you're out there, those first few states start to go by, yet once you're in Virginia, the trail looks like a very long way indeed, which of course it is. But George feels that, next step as he moves closer to home. George will be on after Joanne. Just before I introduce you to Billy, I wanted to let you all know that I've worked out how to reduce prices on my shop, hrntradingpost.com, and ship free to anywhere in the US, and only a flat fee of $5 to Canada. I'll be adding international destinations as cheap as I can in the next few days. Hope you all check it out, and remember, you can see it on our Hiking Radio Network website as well. Now, let's meet Billy Arthur, or backwards. Our guest today is another of those who first heard about the trail when he was in the Boy Scouts, and it became one of those things that he wanted to do one day. Well, one day turned out to be this year. This is Billy Arthur, or backwards. Hey, Billy, good to have you on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Well, pleasure. And I've just been admiring the beard getting longer and longer since you've been back home, obviously. Why are you called backwards?
So I got that trail name from walking backwards, literally walking in reverse.
Okay. No, that's not a good enough answer. Why were you walking in reverse?
So when I started trying to train for the trail, get up my legs, I live in Virginia Beach, which is completely flat.
All right.
And so I was looking up ways to get stronger legs at the very small hill that's in Virginia Beach. And I had been following for a while this guy on Instagram called Knees Over Toes Guy. And he is a big proponent of walking backwards to increase the strength of your joints. And that's something I was really concerned about, my knees especially. So I would go to the park. It's called Mount Trashmore in Virginia Beach. And I would just walk
Mount Trashmore?
up this pretty steep.
Mount Trashmore?
Yeah. It's called Mount Trashmore. It's probably the highest point in all of, Eastern Virginia, I'd imagine. But I was there looking silly. I had my pack on, and I was walking up this hill just backwards. And then when I was on the trail, I would try to keep up that same kind of exercise whenever I got a chance.
Oh my gosh.
And so we were in some places on the trail, you can kind of do that. It's not very safe. So I would keep it to a minimum of just doing it over bridges. And so I was walking across the bridge at the NOC in North Carolina.
Sure.
And I was walking backwards over that bridge. And my partner, Pigpen, she's like, "How about backwards?" And I said, okay, that works.
So tell me, why does it? I can certainly see why you call backwards now. Why does it work so well? Have you wondered what the physiological reason for it working so well is?
I haven't done a ton of research, but I was evangelizing this for a while because I
Okay,
think it really worked well. And my thought is that human beings are designed to walk backwards and have evolved because if you make a kill, like you kill an elk or something,
sure.
how are you going to be drag that back to your camp or whatever? You're going to hold it and you're going to pull backwards. And so I think that, maybe from this is just my speculation, but I think maybe from an evolutionary standpoint, it makes sense to be strong dragging things.
And then they invented the wheel, and they put the elk on some sort of truck or some trolley, and they pulled it walking forwards. That could be why they changed around from walking backwards. so,
Yeah, they just reversed.
so I mentioned that you first found the AT in the Boy Scouts. How that's been a theme from a number of our guests recently. So, how did that happen for you? That you suddenly discovered this was something you wanted to do or you'd like to do?
Well, I remember that first backpacking trip in the Scouts, and I believe it was somewhere in Virginia, and it was on the AT. And when I did my through hike, I was always like looking for where that place was because I don't
yeah,
remember.
yeah,
I think it was maybe in George Washington National Park somewhere. But I remember that trip. Um, of course, we're scouts, so we don't have any of like the proper gear. I think I basically just had I had a Kelty external frame backpack, which
mhm,
was basically what everybody had at the time. And this was, I guess, in early 2000s. Um, but we took this trip, and just the feeling of being out there and having everything that you need on your back, just something, it just like got me. And it's funny because that night, guess we left probably on a Saturday, and we hiked back on a Sunday maybe, but
sure.
it rained the whole Sunday, and it was miserable. And everyone, well, it was miserable for everyone but me. I thought it was just like the most amazing journey. It felt like being in like Lord of the Rings, and I was like Frodo, and just like the hardship and like kids slipping on rocks and falling, and just like it just like kind of bit me, I guess.
I can see how it would be a very romantic notion. That thing about being Frodo and having read Lord of the Rings, as most men do as a young guy, I read it when I was about 12 or 13 years of age. It was a romantic sort of notion, wasn't it? So, was that something that you thought, this is something I enjoyed doing so much, I'm going to do it one day, or it just went into the back of your mind?
Yeah, it was one of those things where I thought I want to do that because that seems like it'd be an extreme adventure. And it was kind of one of those pie in the sky things that I thought, oh, well, I'll probably never be able to do that.
Sure. Yeah.
Um, it was like kind of like, when you're a kid, you have all these illusion, like, I don't know, delusion is the right word or whatever about your
No, no,
life.
no.
It's going to be, I'm going to be a major league baseball player, and I'm going to go to the moon and all sorts of stuff like that. But as I was like going through the scouts and, through my kind of college days and going through, starting a career in my 20s, I just kind of always had it in my head that I wanted to do it one day. And so it was basically for years leading up to it, I was like collecting gear, like piece by piece,
Sure,
and
sure.
kind of learning about it like a slow trickle, and hopefully, thinking that one day I could make it happen.
So, did you consider, though, heading out straight after high school, or was that something that just wasn't realistic notion at the time? Did you have to go straight to work?
Yeah, I basically went straight to work.
Right.
And at that time, there was just, I guess, a lot going on in my life. And I hadn't really started the process of, it still felt like something that was kind of pie in the sky.
Right. Right.
And I think a
Good time to
lot of
do it, though,
people
isn't it?
think
Good
that,
time to do it when you get out of school.
yeah.
Would have been a great time to do it. So, what did you actually do after high school?
I went to college for a year. That didn't work out academically. I wasn't focused, so I
Sure.
dropped out of college. And then I putzed around for a couple years, and then I became an auto tech. So I went auto mechanic,
Sure.
and that's what I did all through my 20s. And I made a decent living at it until I decided to, okay, well, I'm going to go part time and go back to school.
That was interesting. When we spoke before, you said that you said that being, you weren't knocking being an auto mechanic at all because it's a great transferable skill, I'm sure. But you said it didn't satisfy you intellectually. So, were you? How did you become aware of that?
Well, it was more like it kind of came to the point where I was just overworked and I was burnt out, and I realized that it was kind of it's not a job where you age well into it. It's very physically demanding
Wow.
and it's dirty and I mean I like it. I still like working on cars and
Sure.
I figure out how things work. I love working with my hands. But then I was like, okay, well I just need to get a degree even if I don't get into another trade or something or just go back to being a mechanic one day, I'll have the degree and I'll know that I was able to do it intellectually, to prove it to myself
Sure.
and to prove it to everyone else that I'm not just, some dumb guy who's
Yeah.
destined to be a grease monkey.
So what did you got yourself a degree, and what was the degree in?
It was in geology.
In geology, okay, and you then got
Yeah.
involved in as an environment. I've got shady notes here, so bear with me. You got involved as an environmental specialist,
Yeah. Yeah. And I was working at a wastewater processing facility doing lab testing and stuff.
right?
And I didn't find that fulfilling either. So
Yeah, I can see that.
I left.
Yeah,
And yeah, because I was just doing data entry and the same monotonous
right.
tasks. It was okay, I guess. But I decided to switch paths and then I was like, okay, well now I'm just gonna do the trail. And so and
Right,
so
right.
um and then I had a decent amount of time that I was able to earn money doing my own mechanic stuff, which was way better than working in a traditional shop.
And you said you'd already built a house, hadn't you? And so you were able to sell that, and so you were okay
Hmm.
financially when it comes to doing the trail. So when did you actually start to focus on doing the trail itself as a real thing? When it was no longer a pipe dream. So when was that time?
I think it was probably August of 2021,
Yep.
because me and my sister, we went on an overnight somewhere in the Smokies, and I hadn't taken a backpacking trip like in a year or something.
All right.
And then I talked to her and I was like, I always wanted to do the AT, and why shouldn't I? And then she's a very much of an adventurer and we're very close and she was like, "Yeah, do it. You need to do it if you've always wanted to." And yeah, she was awesome, and she was the one who drove me down to Amicola and started off the first section with me.
You definitely need somebody to buy into your dumb dreams, don't you? Don't you think so? That's an important thing in your
Yeah,
life. Yeah, so that's
yeah,
great. She
yeah.
wanted to do that, but I know you've already mentioned you had these knee issues in the past. Did that actually happen to you on a backpacking trip? And how did you cope with it during your hike? If you were worried about your knees,
Yeah, so there was a hike I did. I guess it was in 2018 or something, and I did the Three Ridges hike. So
oh
I
god,
started at Reed's Gap, right where Devil's Backbone is
sure,
basically, and
sure.
I went. I was going south, and so there was that big descent down from the Three Ridges down to whatever gap that is right before the
And then straight
priest.
up the priest after that, yeah, isn't it? Straight up towards the priest after
Yeah,
that,
and
yeah.
so I was just coming down, and I don't know, I was out of shape, and it was November, December, so I had a bunch of cold weather stuff with me, and I just kind of wrenched my knee, overused it, and then I thought, man, this sucks. I'm done, I guess. I'll never be able to do the AT.
Oh dear.
And then so when I started off, I had kind of realized that doctors are always saying, "Oh, well, you have to do rest and ice it," and one of the doctors was just like, "Yeah, well, it's just gonna always hurt. Basically, once it rears its head, it's never gonna go away." And
Nice.
I think a lot of people are really think their joints are very fragile in that way, in that like once you injure it, you're kind of screwed and you need to avoid any kind of activity. But I realized that by reading and getting more involved in it and actually starting to exercise to train, that it's actually you need to have your muscles strong enough to support your joints.
Sure.
And so I had that knee with KT tape when I first started,
Right.
and it never bothered me. And it had, once the muscles started, I was able to use the KT tape as a preventative measure, basically to keep my kneecap from smacking my femur.
Oh, see.
And um,
Oh.
but once those muscles got tight enough, then my right knee never bothered me. And then I had an IT band issue that I sprained it coming down Blood Mountain, but that was on my other knee.
Yeah, that's the thing that was, and once again, I'm questioning my own notes, but in fact, I've looked at them again, and you said that you didn't have a problem with that, right? The one that was a problem, you didn't have a problem with, but your hike was nearly over coming down Blood Mountain with the other knee, wasn't it? So tell us what happened
Yeah.
with that.
Yeah, I mean, I was just coming up and I felt my calf starting to cramp up on the way up. And I just thought that, oh, if I stop or if I take a break, then, it's going to clamp up all the way and I won't be able to make it down. Yeah, I was coming down Blood Mountain and, you well, that place, you can't camp, right? Like, because I forgot which section, but there is that one section where you're not supposed to camp unless you have a bear canister,
Yeah,
which I
actually,
didn't have.
at the Blood Mountain shelter, you can't camp in there, can you? Without a canister, bear canister.
Yeah, and so I had, and in retrospect, I probably should have just waited, And the thing is that it was midday. I had enough daylight, and my leg was kind of cramping up, but the whole time, that whole first section, I was having issues with my calf cramping for whatever reason. Um, and then I just like took a step with, on a cramp, and then it just sprained my IT band, and I thought I was
Oh,
done. It just hurt so bad. I was barely able to get down the mountain, but then I got to Neil's Gap, and everyone there is like, I was thinking if I get to Neil's Gap and I'm not injured, then I can continue to do the trail. But I get to Neil's Gap and like my worst fears has happened,
sure.
and I'm like, okay, well, this is done. And I had met this wonderful couple who were doing the trail, and they were like, okay, well, they were like, we want to pay for you to stay an extra day in your hotel in
Nice.
Blairsville, and that
Right.
was really a generous. And I told them so many times, don't. That's silly. I can afford it, And they're like, no, it'll take off any pressure of you have to maybe getting better, maybe finishing the trail. And yeah, I just had 3 zeros. Yeah, 3 nights, so base almost like 4 zeros.
Did you work out what the problem was?
Yeah, I basically I did a bunch of research and figured out, okay, well, this is the IT band, and like once the swelling kind of went down and I had iced it, I kind of realized, okay, well, this is a common kind of injury and it hurts a lot, but as long as I can kind of manage the pain, it should be better in about 6 weeks.
Sure.
And I had called my sister and I was like, can you come get me? Because I think I'm just done. And it was such a low point. but then I thought, I'm out here. I'm just gonna get it. I'm gonna try to hitch to the trail, and I'm just gonna go, and I'm gonna go back to Neal's Gap, and I'm gonna keep going northbound. And there's a camp that's like a mile up, I think, from Neal's Gap, and I was like, I'll stay there the first night. And that first day, I did 5 miles, and then the next day, I did like 5 more, and the pain would come and go. And I remember when I went up to the first time I got some like relief, it was still in Georgia. It was this Rocky Mountain and then Trey Mountain. These
Yes.
two big steep ascents on the same day were back to back, and my leg felt fine. Like it just had seemed like it wasn't a problem. I got to camp and I could go get water without being excruciating
Nice.
pain.
Nice.
And I had a beautiful campsite right off this rocky ledge at Trey Mountain Shelter, I think that's where it was, and it just gave me this hope. And then the next day, I wasn't as lucky. So it was kind of like it seemed like it was just basically my pain level would be based on whatever the terrain was, but I was determined. I just didn't want to go home.
When you started looking into this, though, didn't you? You must have been aware, like most of us are, that a lot of this is mental and not physical. So you had that mindset, you wanted to do it, but you thought you were injured, you weren't going to do it. How did you keep going? Why did you keep going? Were you concerned about not finishing for social pressures or anything like that? Or just you thought your sister give you a hard time over it?
No, I don't think she would have given me a hard time, but yeah, it did feel like a social pressure. Um, I was kind of concerned, like I said, with my knee past injury that I wasn't going to be able to do it, but I just had to go, just give it my all, and so I tried to keep a lid on it and not like advertise it to my whole social group.
Yes.
That I was like going to the trail just in case I came back like a week later.
Yeah.
But of course it got out. I told one friend, and then everyone figured out, and they threw this party for me before I left, and I was like, oh gosh. So I mean, like I wanted, like with every fiber of my being, I wanted to be out on the trail, and I felt like I needed to do it, and I couldn't give up unless I couldn't physically take another step. And but the social pressure, yeah, that helped a little bit to keep me out there.
You know what? It's sometimes not a bad thing to have that social pressure. I think in many ways, it gives you another impetus to keep going. But from when we spoke before, one of the things that I suspect, because you told me, you started feeling better after Trey Mountain and so on, and you got through Georgia and so on. It may have had something to do with the fact that you met somebody called Pigpen, didn't you? So tell us about meeting Pigpen.
So I met her, and she's been my sweetheart since.
How do people do that on the trail? I have no idea. Get together on the trail. I just have no idea at all.
Yeah, I didn't think it was going to happen for sure. Everyone at this point, I'm still going pretty slow, and
Sure.
basically everyone I'm meeting, they're just like they're in the wind. They're gone.
Sure.
It feels very transient, and like people are forming tramways, and I'm meeting cool people, and they're just like going at different way too fast for me.
Sure.
But I met Pigpen right at the Georgia border line, or Georgia North Carolina line, at Bly Gap, around there.
Wow.
And
Real
she was
early.
hiking at
Real
the
early.
time. She was hiking at the time with her friend named Doing It, who everyone who met her in 2022 remembers her. She has this great outgoing personality, and Pigpen was hiking with her mom at the time, and they
All right.
that throuple started all together, and we met, and it was snowing. There was that snowstorm in April, I guess the first week of April, and we met in that snowstorm, and her and Doing It and her mom, they were so excited to get to that North Carolina border.
Sure.
And we took pictures at the border, and then we all ended up camping at the same spot, like right Bly Gap, right down from that ridge where that crazy twisted oak is. And then the next morning, they were gone. They had gone into town. I think they had gone up to Deep Gap, I think it was called, and then they had gotten a shuttle. So I just hiked through the snow that day.
Hang on. Did you immediately feel an attraction to Pigpen, or was it just you didn't think about it? You just carried on hiking. There were nice people you met, and you were never going to see them again.
No, I thought she was cool.
Right?
Yeah, she had her just.
You had to say that.
No, I thought she was cute, and I remember thinking, like that crew was just so was different than other people I'd met on the trail. They were very ecstatic, excited. They were enthusiastic.
Sure.
At that point, a lot of people were kind of not that. I guess they were more reserved, especially about meeting new people.
So you met up with them again. When did you meet up with them again?
Well, I had gotten into Franklin, so they had gone into Franklin, North Carolina that night after the big snowstorm, and I stayed at Standing Indian, and then I went into town, into Franklin at the next gap, and I saw doing it goes, "Hey, Billy!" I didn't have backwards yet.
Right.
But she said, "Hey, Billy, you want to come to the Chinese buffet?"
Nice.
And then I was like, "Yes." And then, of course, and then, so, we hung out, and then we went to the Chinese buffet and then to the Walmart to resupply, and we were joking around the whole time, and they were just really cool to hang out with, and they had great senses of humor, and I love cracking jokes.
So you had a tramley, and you started hiking together from then, I presume. But her mother and the vivacious friend, the vivacious woman, suddenly they weren't there anymore. Did they go home, or what happened?
No, well, it didn't quite. We kind of just kept running into each other. So I was staying in Franklin. I think I was zeroing the day that they left.
Right.
Franklin. So I think they got back on the trail. And so, of course, I'm like, oh, okay, well, I'm never going to see them again. It's a miracle I saw them a second time. I don't see, I'm sure they're going to go way faster. But then I kept running into them. Like, I ran into them at Wyabald. And then I ran into them and again, like at Westerbald, where there's that big fire tower with an open platform.
Yes.
And I thought I was never going to see him again. Of course, each time, they went on, and we ended up staying on the top of that platform on the top of Westerbald, because it was a beautiful sunny day. It was warm, and then we cowboy camped on that platform. They were like, "Oh, stay up here with us." And I was like, "Okay." And that night, actually, we knew it was going to start to rain. The forecast said about 6 a.m. it was going to start to rain. And then so we were like, okay, well, just wake up at 6 a.m. when it starts to sprinkle. But then when night fell, it started, like, the wind got crazy up there. And eventually the wind died down a little bit, but then about 3 a.m. felt raindrops on my face. And so we all just shoved all our stuffs in our packs and, like, basically ran down the mountain, the 8 miles to get to NOC. So we got to NOC like at 8 a.m. And we hiked. And
that is not an easy downhill either, is it? Really, there's a lot of quite scary places around that, and to do it at night as well. So, but eventually, I know there was just the two of you together, and I've often wondered how that happens when tramlers devolve into duos, and how that happened with you, right in front of her mum, by the way, which was impressive.
Well, we were all, like, staying together basically, but I think me and her just had a similar pace. and which was great. And I think maybe that she was lagging behind to hang out with me, and I was trying to push myself to stay with her, but we just like really got along, and we went the same pace, and we both had the same kind of philosophy where we wanted to like really enjoy being out there, and we just really hit it off as like great friends. And we kind of always had like her mom or in doing it would be at either usually ahead of us,
Yeah.
sometimes behind us, but we were always staying at like same camp. And
Sure.
then this is through the Smokies. We're always at the same camp, but then doing it's like she's just more independently minded, and then so she kind of split off to like kind of do her own thing to crush more miles. Like she
Sure.
was feeling
Sure.
like much more fit than us, I guess. And she always wanted to kind of do the trail on her own.
Nice.
So she just was like, okay, well, now that I got my trail legs, I'm just going to go.
How convenient that
And
is for you.
yeah, it was great. And
Nice.
then,
Nice.
so we're still, but in her, it's funny because her mother, Bravey Cat, is what I think I coined her. I gave her that name
Gravy cat.
because she's the opposite of a scaredy cat.
And you're still with Pigpen, and that must be
Yeah.
interesting. You met on a sort of visceral shared experience. Yet coming back to real life, I'd imagine that must have been quite a test. How did you cope with that? Because it isn't the same thing, is it, when you come back? If you shared all this time together on the trail, the only time you knew her was hiking the Appalachian Trail, and that isn't so-called real life, is it? So, tell me, how do you work through getting back into a normal life?
It's actually been really easy.
Good.
Because we were spending all our time together on the trail, and we're eating together and doing things together and making plans together, and so it just really translated well into real life.
Nice. I'm surprised, but nice. I'm surprised because it is such a different life out there, isn't it? It's something you've never experienced before, and nor had I. And I found it just overwhelming, frankly. And then to come back into this real life, whatever that real life is, it is so different. So to carry that on, the fact that you've shared so much with her in the past, and now you share the same things as well, and of course you know what the other one's talking about, which is also helpful. Because you've both experienced this. And in fact, you said that you started to get this feeling of almost mourning or regret that hit you in the 100-mile wilderness. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it was just when everything was ending, it kind of just hit me that I didn't want it to end.
Mm.
Um, like, and that's the thing about the AT, is that you have to just keep going, and you can be at the most beautiful place, having the most amazing experiences, but you just have to keep going. And it seems like you're racing towards the end but you don't want it to be over. And we're in the section where it gets cruisy towards the end, and
Yes.
it rained a lot on us, and we were running out of food, but there was no place that would have rather been, and we kind of got to the point where Katahdin was in the distance, and a lot of people, I think, cry at on Katahdin when they realize it's over, but me, it was just when I was there, and it was also that I was afraid that when we got off the trail, this romance would change, and it wouldn't be the same, and I was fearful for what that would mean for a relationship. And so, yeah, I mean, there was one night we're like laying in the shelter, and I just am, lamenting the end of everything, and lamenting going back into society. And I just have this image of Pigpen like getting in her car and just like driving away from me, and that just like made me break down. I started to cry.
Wow.
And I it was tough, but then, you hit the kind of the emotional bottom, right? And then you can only like go up from there, and then you
Yeah.
just kind of cope. You realize that things are changing, and it's been really wonderful that we've kind of made this commitment to each other to keep each other going through the trail. And now we're just continuing on with that in our quote unquote normal lives.
So what happens next
And
to the two of you? Are you actually together right now? Are you living together now or not?
yeah, she's here in the other room.
Right. Nice. That's
And
cool.
yeah, we've
So what
only
happens
been
next?
separated. Oh, well, right now we've been I'm at my grandmother's house. She just moved into this house, and I've been just doing a ton of stuff for my family. We got back right from the trail. We spent a week or two, maybe a week and a half with her parents in Rhode Island, kind of, decompressing and
Sure.
recovering physically, not
Yeah.
doing much of anything. And then I got down here to Virginia Beach, and she came with me, and we started building a deck on the back of my grandmother's house. And so we just got right to work doing that, got right to work kind of setting up the house and fixing everything that needs to be fixed, and, staying super busy. And she's been awesome. And I love that about her as well, is that she likes to get her hands dirty and likes to be active. And so that's what we've been doing. There has now, like after we finish this podcast, we're actually going to the Eastern Shore of Virginia, where my family has this cottage.
Sure.
That's kind of always a project. And so my truck is loaded up with new doors and windows that we're going to work on that and install and kind of play house over there for a little bit. And then, long term, I guess it remains to be seen. We're kind of both lucky to be able to still afford to be unemployed.
Yeah, yeah. And you said
But
before you're useful with your hands. You know what you're doing. You can build things and put things together. I think it's wonderful that when people meet each other on the trail, they find a kindred spirit because they're in an environment where they're both experiencing the same things. The fact that you've been able to keep that going afterwards is even better. So I congratulate you, both of you, for finishing the trail, and appreciate you coming on and telling your story, sharing your story with us. It was quite romantic, actually.
yeah, it's been great. It's really been unbelievable. I think doing the trail in itself is one of the most beautiful. It is the most beautiful, fulfilling, wonderful thing I've ever done in my life. And to meet someone like her, it's just icing on the cake. Is not even is not enough of a description.
Oh, that's cool.
But the whole
That's so cool.
experience and the falling in love, and at the same time, while going through the trail, has just been the most wonderful thing that's ever happened to me. And I'm so glad I didn't go home from Blairsville, Georgia.
That's exactly what I was thinking. I was reading those notes and thinking if he'd gone home, he wouldn't have even met her. So how about that? But yeah, well, look, yeah, as I say, thanks so much for coming on. Appreciate you telling the story, and I hope I want you to send some pictures to me, and I want one of them, if possible, to be the one when you're at the Georgia North Carolina state line, when one of your first pictures with her, I presume. So it'd be nice to see that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, appreciate you coming on. Thanks for talking to us, and hopefully we'll meet sometime.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, thanks for having me. This has been cool.
Cheers then. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
I still don't get it when people get together on trail and start a romantic relationship. I know it happens, of course. I saw it several times on both of my thru hikes, but it's that real life thing that the couple have to go back to, isn't it? Billy seemed to be handling it well, and I'm sure we all wish him and Pigpen all the very best for their futures together. Now the Mighty Blue class of 23, and a woman who can't wait to get out there. This is Joanne Flagg. Well, our next guest on the Mighty Blue class of 2023 is Joanne Flagg. Hey, Joanne, how are you?
Great. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks. And but I'm not as excited as you are because you're about or soon going to be going hiking on the AT. And I'm asking people pretty much the same sort of questions in our initial conversation. First up, why are you doing this? What is, I presume you live a comfortable life and for some reason you're going to trade it all in to go and stink in the woods. So why are you doing this?
Well, I knew this question was coming, so I tried to put it into words for us. It's something that I learned about 30 years ago when I heard a graduating senior in high school had hiked it, and I thought, wow, that is really neat. And it's always been in the back of my head. And then I had a high school classmate of my own doing it, and I said, oh, I thought that sounded so cool, but I would never think to do it. And he said, make a plan and do it. So I made a plan and to do it. And then I was thinking back when I was a kid, and I grew up on a dairy farm, so we had a lot of land that I could roam on, and I would go out just into the woods. And sometimes I knew where I was going to come out, and sometimes I didn't. But whenever you
want to get way past that. You want to know exactly where you're going, by the way, when you're on the AT.
Yes. And then I liked camping. I camped in an old canvas tent. When my boys were little, we camped multiple times a summer up in Maine. And when I had a camper, then I would be resentful that I had to sleep in the camper, and I miss sleeping on the ground. And I just want to be out in the woods and know what it's like to not have to think about getting back and what I have to do next, and just that freedom to be out there without the next thing that I have to do and see what that's like. And 6 months is a long time to be doing that, but I'm really curious to see what that's going to be like.
Are you pretty confident you're going to enjoy it?
I am. I think it's going to be.
What gives you that confidence to think you're actually going to enjoy it?
Because I've always liked being out there, and it's just something that I feel like I'm going to go out there and do it. And one of my close friends said to me, she said, you thought about not making it to the end? And I'm like, no. So I do understand I might not make it to the end, but it's just plug along, go along, enjoy the scenery. I think it's going to take me forever because I'm going to get to a beautiful spot and just go, oh, and sit there for a while and soak it in.
Yeah, you should do that. I did it a little bit second time, but when I went because Trigger was my hiking partner, and he got kind of antsy towards the end about getting home. He wanted to get home, so he pushed us forward quite a bit. But I think if you can take the time and sit on those beautiful spots and sit on a rock and look out when the view is there, just enjoy that view while it's there. And when are you actually planning to start your hike?
The second half of April. I haven't chosen a date yet.
Wow, second half. Second half. Why that relatively late?
I'm going to flip-flop. I'm going to start in Harpers Ferry.
Right.
Go up to Katahdin. I wanted to do the hard parts before I'm totally exhausted.
Hang on. You could look at it a different way. You could say the hard parts are supposedly New Hampshire and Maine, and frankly, it's all hard. But say New Hampshire and Maine, the hard parts. Well, by the time you've done 17 or 1,800 miles, you are primed to do the hard parts. Mm-hmm. So it is perfectly set up as a trail to finish at Katahdin. But you feel that you're going to get your legs and all that sort of thing, and then have a nice relaxing down going south from Harpers Ferry. Is that right?
Yeah. A little like, I don't know. Yeah, being able to end seeing the beauty of the Blue Ridge Mountains and down through that way. I've never seen it in the fall. So that's an attraction too. I have a little bit of a fear of missing out of spring down in the lower parts because the wildflowers, I would love to see the fields of wildflowers that we see just a few of here, like the trillium and just the mountain laurel and those kinds of things. But
sure. But, there's absolutely no rule against you not going again.
True. I do have a list, though, so I'll need to keep moving.
So what are you doing to prepare for this physically? Because it is a physical challenge, particularly. I mean, you're retired now? Is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
Right. So if you don't mind me asking, how old are you?
I'm 62.
Okay. So are you preparing physically for it? And or have you always kept yourself relatively fit?
I used to be a runner, and then
nice.
I quit because of an arthritic hip, but I can do the hiking. So I am hiking at least once a week, and as winter goes on, I'm going to hike more and carry a heavier pack. I always carry a day pack that's heavy for a day pack, probably.
Yeah.
And I just signed up. One thing I like to do is sign up for challenges. So I just signed up for the Alaska Trails virtual challenge to hike 125 miles in the winter season, the calendar season for winter, which is from Anchorage to some city that I don't remember right now. But
nice, that's nice. And if you listen to the show, and I believe you do, then you know that the major part of this hike isn't the physical. The physicality you're going to get eventually once you get going. I mean, it's terrible the first couple of 100 miles for me. But what about the mental challenge? Because you know it will be a mental challenge out there.
Yeah. That's when you take your rose-colored glasses off, right? And you say, yes, there are going to be some days where it's like, why am I out here? But you keep going. I've always been pretty tenacious. I'm going to have to grow that from the start. I don't know what it's like to hike day in and day out. So that's something I'm going to have to learn and remember my goals and remember that I love being out there to keep going.
I got to tell you will have to remind yourself quite a few times that you love being out there because you won't love being out there. and being retired, I presume you've got your matters in order, and so you can probably afford to do this financially. But are you going to do it as and I hesitate to use the expression platinum blazing, but are you going to do it quite comfortably in terms of where you stay when you go into town, or are you going to kind of stay in the woods most of the time?
I imagine staying in the woods most of the time. I think I know how I'm going to do it. And that's one of my curiosities is how will I end up doing it? Because you have your vision, but then you don't know how it's going to play out once you get out there. I do like being in the woods. I'm like, why don't people take more zeros during the day in the woods instead of in town? And maybe they do, but we just don't hear about it very much. But
do you know, funny enough, I know a number of people who've taken zeros on the trail, and that struck me as lunacy. But in fact, it's probably not a bad idea. If you've got a good spot to stay at and you've got a great view or you've got a stream relatively close by, I mean, it's a pretty nice place to be hanging out. So doing that will be a really interesting thing. Mm-hmm. And in terms of getting your equipment together, you've been preparing for this. Have you been buying new stuff, or is this stuff you've accumulated over the years?
I haven't been a backpacker, so I've been buying things the last couple of years. The Black Friday sales are a great help.
Right. Yeah, because it ain't cheap, is it, some of this stuff?
Nope.
And what do you expect your starting weight to be then with food and water?
I'm hoping to be under 30 pounds.
Wow. Yeah.
I'm hoping.
I was 42 pounds first time and I was 27 pounds second time, which just shows you how much rubbish you take with you, and try to keep the extraneous stuff down. You don't need stuff when you're out there. It's remarkable how you get entertained by other people on the trail. You don't really need iPads and stuff like that. Are you going to get support from home, or are you going to actually resupply once you're in town?
I haven't finalized that plan yet. My initial thinking is to do some of each, because I think I'll get sick of that trail junk food. So to have a plan, I won't.
But I tell you, you'll never want to eat oatmeal again as long as you live.
I know you keep saying that, but that's one of the things that I used to eat every day as a teacher.
Enjoy.
I'd take it into school.
Enjoy then. You're gonna cook or cold soak then?
Definitely cook in the colder weather, and I'd like to try cold soaking, but still there's the coffee. So I totally may still take the stove, but
I couldn't agree more. It's got to be coffee in the morning just to get yourself started, don't you? And when you're out there, what are you most looking forward to? Is there something? Is there some place or some person or some type of activity you're looking forward to?
I think it's Oh, geez, I hadn't thought about that.
You're not looking forward to anything.
Yeah, it's just a package deal. I'm looking forward to the camping at night.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Will you camp by yourself much, or are you going to stay at shelters or campground shelters?
I like to camp by myself.
Away from shelters, would you?
Perhaps. I have to feel it out, but that's my thinking. Yeah.
It took me 400 miles before I camped by myself, not at a shelter. And it was accidental as well. And it was fine. I didn't die. It was great.
Yeah. Well, it can be scary. The first time I went out up in town on the top of the mountain, and I settled in for the night, and all of a sudden I heard a pack of coyotes howling. And I was like,
I read that.
Oh my God, they run in packs. If they come, I'm going to flash my flashlight right in their eyes.
Good luck with that.
I know.
And what do you least look? If you're not sure what you're most looking forward to, what are you least looking forward to?
Being cold and being wet.
Yeah, you can't get away from. Well, yeah, you can probably get away from most of the cold, I suspect, when you're going end of April and flip flopping. But I would think the wet thing that's a given. You're going to get wet, and I've yet to find any waterproof gear that really works for more than 20 minutes. So that's a mindset thing. You just have to get used to that. And what about trail names? Have you considered trail names, or is that something you're prepared to let somebody give you a terrible name, by which you will be known for the rest of your life, by the way?
I'm going to let somebody give me a trail name, but I'm definitely going to use veto powers if needed.
Absolutely, quite right. So, okay, well, look, as I do with all my guests, I wish you the best. I'm sure you'll give it your best shot. You look very calm and very relaxed about it. So hopefully you still feel the same when you start in April. But we'll catch up again with some of your preparations before you actually start. Okay.
Okay, great.
Okay. Then.
Thank you.
Cheers then. Bye.
Bye-bye.
I don't recall that Joanne mentioned it, but in her original email to me, she told me that once she gets to Springer, she's considering heading on and finishing her hike at Flagg Mountain, the mountain that bears her name. She'd love to say hi to Nimble or Nomad, but then who wouldn't? Before we get to George Stephanos and then the hail came, grateful thanks go as ever to our donors. This week I want to thank our monthly donors first, who are Alan Troy, Jessica Diaz, Michelle Brown, Hugh Ickrath, Justin Mullins and Kevin Eastman. Also, Dennis Young, Connie Nestor and my buddy Eric Gross made donations. It's because of all of you that I continue to do these shows and try to keep them as fresh as I can. Cheers one and all. Finally today, George Stephanos is done with Virginia. I recall that moment. It isn't because Virginia is a bad state, it's just that it feels like you have been there forever. It's a great day to pass over the state line. Happy New Year, everybody, by the way. And I'll see you next year. Sunday, the 10th of July, 1983. Mile 981.8. I got an early start on the trail today, 6:15. Another 5 miles of AT road walk were on tap, and I wanted to get them done before the relentless July Virginia heat had a chance to kick in. I quickly covered the remainder of the loop trail back to Virginia 601, which I followed, mostly downhill, for 3 miles to Snickers Gap. I passed several large estates very similar to the ones that I went by yesterday. From the gap, the Appalachian Trail continued to follow Virginia 601, now climbing. Just before the pavement ended and the trail left the road and into the woods, I walked past a house with a sign in front of the mailbox which said, "Backpackers Welcome, shelter, cold showers, food, phone." The guys who I met last night at the shelter told me that the man who owns this house is a computer programmer who works out of his home and is a friend to backpackers. He's hooked up a garden hose to a shower setup in his backyard for the use of backpackers willing to withstand a good dose of cold water. It was only 8 o'clock on a Sunday morning when I passed by. I didn't wish to disturb the man by ringing the doorbell, so I left a thank you note in his mailbox. That sign was like an oasis in a desert of no trespassing signs. Shortly afterward, the trail left the road, went into the woods and entered West Virginia. The last few miles of the Appalachian Trail in Virginia drifted back and forth across its state line with West Virginia. The trail, for the most part, was on rocky, old woods roads. The forest was lush and relatively cool, and for once in northern Virginia, the route was rather direct. The walking was quite easy despite the rocks. There were few views at which to linger, so I arrived at Keys Gap Shelter before 3 o'clock. It's been great to have all this free time in the afternoons in North Virginia. I've covered 48 miles of Appalachian Trail in 3 days since Shenandoah, so I've been staying ahead of my pace even as I've been enjoying these short days. Right now, I'm feeling as well rested as I've felt at any time on this trip. I think I'm about ready for some long days after my stop in Harpers Ferry. I'm actually looking forward to them. I'm 438 18 miles from Connecticut, and I'm eagerly anticipating seeing my friends and family again. Virginia, which once faced me with a massive 545 miles, is now a couple of hours' stroll from becoming a memory. The lean, mean mileage machine has chewed it up and spit it out. I'm nearing the 1,000 mile mark, and when I cross into Maryland Tuesday, I'll have conquered both Virginia and West Virginia. That will be 5 states down and 9 to go. There are only about 42 miles of the Appalachian Trail in Maryland, so I should be through that state in 2 or 3 days. That will certainly be a lift after spending more than a month grinding through Virginia. All this calls for a celebration. Behind this shelter, a side trail descends gently 1/10 of a mile to a little grocery store in Keys Gap. I can carry all kinds of weight for 1/10 of a mile. This calls for incredible decadence, gluttony seldom matched in the history of the Appalachian Trail, and damn it, I'm just the dude to do it. 9 p.m. I purchased a 2-litre bottle of Coke and about 10 pounds of food for tonight. The soda is almost gone, and 2 big shopping bags of food are reduced to a few scraps to supplement the usual instant oatmeal in the morning. A few miles ahead lies Harpers Ferry and a long steaming shower with my name on it. Monday the 11th of July 1983, mile 987.9. I didn't hit the trail today until 7:45. I always have trouble getting myself going in the morning when I have just a short day's hike ahead of me. I lose my sense of urgency, which is the only thing that can get me motivated quickly right after I wake up. I'm not a morning person. After 4 miles on the Appalachian Trail, I reached the junction with the Loudon Heights Trail, which descended steeply off the west side of the ridge into West Virginia. I turned onto this path, which is part of the Blue Blaze alternate route through Harpers Ferry. I had entered Virginia on June the 7th. As a result of the strange crawl of time along the AT, that felt like a lifetime ago. Virginia was now history. After a mile of descent, the AT crossed the Shenandoah River on a highway bridge and climbed the steep bluffs lining the opposite shore, beginning the last mile into town. Harpers Ferry, West Virginia, is located on the roughly triangular-shaped peninsula between the rivers at the point where the Shenandoah empties into the Potomac. Higher ground encircles the town on all 3 sides of the triangle. To the north are the lofty, overhanging cliffs of Maryland Heights across the Potomac on Elk Mountain in Maryland. Across the Shenandoah to the southeast are Loudon Heights, atop the ridge that the Appalachian Trail followed along the Virginia-West Virginia border this morning. Southwest of Harpers Ferry, the ground of the peninsula rises rather steeply to the crest of Bolivar Heights. Harpers Ferry played an important historic role during the Civil War. This was the spot where John Brown raided the U.S. Army arsenal to obtain guns for his ill-fated slave revolt. He was later captured, tried and hung here by a U.S. Army detachment led by Colonel Robert E. Lee. Located on the northern mouth of the Shenandoah Valley, Harpers Ferry was the gateway to the South's most important granary for the North and a launching spot for campaigns menacing Washington, Baltimore and Harrisburg for the Confederates. General Stonewall Jackson fought his famous Valley campaigns in the Shenandoah Valley, including the capture of the U.S. Army garrison at Harpers Ferry prior to the bloody Battle of Antietam. After Jackson's death, General Jubal Early again captured the Harpers Ferry garrison on his way to the 1864 raid that brushed the outskirts of Washington, D.C. Later in the year, U.S. General Philip Sheridan used this spot as a springboard for the campaign that finally destroyed Early's army, during which he burned most of the lower end of the valley, a crude but effective method of choking off much of the provisions flowing to Lee's Army of Northern Virginia in the trenches around Richmond and Petersburg during the cruel final months of the war. The town and a portion of the surrounding area have been designated a National Historic Park, and the downtown area is slowly being restored to reflect the era around 1860. I arrived at the headquarters of the Appalachian Trail Conference at 10:30. I picked up the brand new edition of the New York, New Jersey guidebook and put in an order for the newest edition of the Maine guidebook, which is due out in about a week. There are ongoing extensive relocations in all 3 of these states, and current trail information will be important. I also purchased the Philosopher's Guide to the AT, a publication put out by a recent thru-hiker with current information on the trail geared towards the needs of other thru-hikers. The ATC's reception desk is run by a lady named Jean Cashin, known as a friend to thru-hikers. She gave me directions to the post office and called to reserve a room for me at the Hilltop House, the cheaper of the town's 2 hotels. I picked up my supply package at the post office and checked into the hotel, an old renovated mansion. My small room cost me $26 for the night. There are no great bargains in Harpers Ferry, but Hilltop House is a classy place. I took one of my marathon hot showers and lay around on the bed until 3 p.m, looking over my new ATC publications. I was not wildly enthusiastic about leaving that air-conditioned room to venture back out into another July afternoon steam bath, but I needed rice, instant oatmeal, and several other important staples which I had lacked in sufficient quantities for the next stretch of trail. The most crucial lack was Pop-Tarts. I'd eaten both boxes from my supply package on the trail from Linden, Virginia. I stopped by ATC headquarters again for directions. They told me that the only groceries within walking distance were at a convenience store about a mile away. The store was a bust. The only item they carried which I needed was the rice. I have no Pop-Tarts for the next stretch of the AT. More heartbreak on this trail of woes. Back at the ATC, they helped me wrap my package for home and weighed it on a postal scale so I could give them the money for postage. Someone here is going to drop it off at the post office tonight, saving me a walk. They're extremely helpful here. They sell Coleman fuel in odd amounts to hikers, so tomorrow I will drop by to top off my reserve bottle. When I arrived back at the motel at 4, I called home. My physical condition had been very good since that 8-mile day on June 22nd, but suddenly, as I stood talking on the phone, I broke out in a heavy sweat. I became dizzy and nauseous. I had to cut short my phone call and walk back to the coolness of my room to collapse onto the bed. I awoke at 7:45, feeling okay. I think that perhaps all the sleep deprivation lately just caught up to me. I barely made dinner downstairs, arriving 5 minutes before they stopped seating at 8 o'clock. The meal and the service were classy, even to someone who had just been to Paris. Tomorrow I'll be entering Maryland. The past few days' hikes since Shenandoah National Park have been a preview of what to expect from the next few states. There will be much more development along the Appalachian Trail. I'll see many more people, pass many more houses, cross a lot of roads, and there will be more numerous and lengthier roadwalks. The scenic grandeur of the southern Appalachians is giving way to the more subdued attractiveness of the long, low, rolling ridges of the central Appalachians. On the plus side, all those stores and restaurants I have passed lately are also a harbinger of things to come. The occasional food crises I have endured should also become a thing of the past for a while. That is crucial at the moment. I've only enough breakfasts for 4 days, and Duncannon, Pennsylvania, my next supply town, is about a week's hike away. If I can only pick up some Pop-Tarts somewhere, I will truly have a reason to go on living. I'm going to try to step up my pace as I pass through Maryland, Pennsylvania, New Jersey and New York. The lower elevations and the lack of distracting scenery should help me in this endeavour. After that, I'll be home, back in the mountains of New England. From Connecticut onward, I know that each state will be a little more scenic than the one before. I'm looking forward to that. At the end of the trail lie the cool October forests of Maine and a mountain named Katahdin. 1,150.6 miles to go.